I am glad I got into this third volume of the Abarat series because it was well worth it. Most of the elements that made the original series kid-friendly are almost all gone by now, turning into a legit dark fantasy. Now, I will discuss the beautiful paintings in the work and the majesty of absolute midnight, so stay tuned. Welcome to biblioCultist, where I review books that I find interesting in the topics of religion, philosophy, history, and fiction. Please remember, subscribe to the channel and click the bell for notifications. Liking the video, sharing the video, all these things really helps out, grow the channel, and I really appreciate those that already do this. And I will put my X account in the bottom, my Ko-Fi if you want to donate a single tip or a recurring one. You can check out my merch store. A combination of all these things, or even a single one of these things that I just suggested, really helps the channel out. And once you do them, you really are assisting the process of growth. So even if you just like it, that's enough. If you subscribe, that's great, etc. So again, I appreciate those that already subscribe, and thank you for watching. In this episode, I'm going through Abarat, Absolute Midnight by Clive Barker, and this edition is from HarperCollins 2011. Now, Clive Barker has only written 3 in this series, although he did publicly state many years back that he was planning on doing a quintet. So 5 books of the entire Abarat series, and supposedly, I think I read it was in 2004, he said he was working on these, but as you can tell, it's been a couple of decades and we still haven't seen anything beyond this work. So unfortunately, it may be the case that this book will be the last one in the series, although it could be something that he already wrote them and he just hasn't really wanted to publish them. We don't know. But so far, this is it. The paintings in this work are beautiful and still very strange, just like the original ones. And for those that are not familiar, you can go to my Clive Barker playlist or to the Abarat playlist. I made one specifically for this series, and you can see my previous reviews on the first and second volume, so you can kind of get familiar. But all the original artwork that Barker himself made are in this work, and it makes the entire series to be very special because it's a combination of fiction and visual art, and that in itself is just spectacular as it is. The only difference that I notice in this work is that the paintings are less character driven than previously. So in the first work and in the second work, you can tell that he is developing the characters and the visual environment. So the paintings are crucial to kind of navigate this world and the feel of the world. But by the third volume, the art takes its own movement, and it's primarily a continuation of the world, of course, but it seems to be a lot more experimental and less concerned about being character driven. Now, all 3 books are well harmonized here, so there's not really much of a break. I did say after the first review that I believe that the first volume would have been fine ending there. He seemed to have written a book that wrapped itself up pretty nicely in the first book, but I can understand why he wanted to explore this particular universe a little bit more. So in this third volume, the main characters are very prominent, and a lot of the ones you thought were gone are back. So it carries a continuation of everything that you would have liked of the first 2 volumes, but it is heavier and darker because it has an eschatological weight. Everything is meant to die, to end in the Abarat itself. So this work explores a lot more of theological concerns, metaphysical explorations, but the mood itself, it's just darker. And in this pagan universe, to call it something, each individual carries a certain magic, a potential of power to affect everyone and everything, and it also interconnects with our world. So like any classic fantasy work, the notion of bridges between our reality and an alternative reality is crucial to keep the work relevant and meaningful to a human audience, to put it in a particular way. But I want to give you folks a quote from the work that is kind of related to this point. Now she was familiar with that idiot world. She studied it for almost 16 years through the eyes of Candy Quackenbush. She had witnessed in nauseating detail how the human world worked, its rituals of comfort, television, food, religion, its appetite for poison, television, food, religion, and for the monstrous edifices of desire, television, food, religion. She understood them all. Now, of course, what's fascinating about that quote is the mix of something quite insignificant and unworthy, like television, in combination with food and religion, because these three are in three different ontological categories, and making the claim that all three are somehow the same when it comes to its psychological impact, its decadence, etc., is quite fascinating, because food is a necessity. Now, of course, the excessive consumption of it, the obsession with it, is perverse, for sure. But it is a natural instinct, so it falls in a different category than, for example, television, which is the desire for entertainment, but also for controlled programming. So quite different from an excessive consumption of food. Also, religion is such a vague category these days, because does she mean some kind of organized religion? Vis-a-vis what? Disorganized religion? Does she mean the inclination of human beings to look for God, to find themselves reflected in the universe? It seems to be an oversimplification, is my point. And it's cliched because modern people tend to be obsessed with the argument that religion is somehow bad, even though everything they do is permeated by a religious sentiment. So their politics tend to be religiously structured. Even atheists are religiously obsessed with their position, and even their philosophical arguments are, at the end of the day, a form of religious argument. And it's just an advocacy for an empty God, a God of nothingness. But there's still a God involved, a blind belief in the existence of no God. And once you organize atheism into an actual structure, you have a religion whose God is emptiness. And that is basically what many schools of Buddhism advocate. So it's kind of ironic. Now, the reason I think this book has departed from the child category is because of how it explores the concept of death, and because a lot of the philosophical underpinnings tap into hardcore pessimism, self-defeating skepticism, and it utilizes almost like a teenage inclination towards existential anger as a way of explaining reality. But the way that he goes about it is quite adult, and I think it carries too many confusing emotions and ideas that could really wreak havoc on the young mind. Not because of the ideas themselves, but because of the way they are presented. And I understand this. When I grew up, a lot of the music I listened to, a lot of the movies I was presented with, carried this form of existential dread that was not very well defined or even packaged, so that I was free to just concoct my own interpretation. But most of the interpretations that could derive from them were quite dark and useless, to be very straightforward. So they didn't really help me understand the world. They just confused my ability to categorize, organize, and understand reality. Now, Candy, the main character, speaks of a soul, critiquing atheist viewpoints, which is why I mentioned it earlier, and specifically mentioning the notion of being just bags of meat, which is a classic atheistic presentation of existence for human beings. So the author specifically makes the main character criticize this and argue that there must be a soul, there must be something beyond. that her experience in the Abarat proves this. It is a fantasy after all, so the metaphysical, the magical is actively in your face. So obviously, the atheistic perspective would be ridiculous from the point of view of someone living in the Abarat and experiencing that world. So I think it is unnecessary to mention, but I think it's interesting he puts the main character to make that case. After all, the reason atheism is a lot more popular in our world is because modern man feels disconnected from the magic of existence. There's nothing magical about reality. The scientific revolution has laid bare, or at least pretends to, have explored everything and discovered all the secrets. So there's no more magic. There's no mystery or secrets to reveal. Because even the secrets that could be revealed are going to be revealed as non-secrets. Literally, the entire infrastructure of scientism is about proving the lack of magic in reality. And because that is the gist of the position, it removes the possibility of seeing anything in our world as supernatural. Now, of course, in this world of the Abarat, magic is in your face, and it mocks the very idea that there's only a single dimensional possibility and everything is discoverable, etc. It allows magic and fantasy to expand. In our world, we have been stripped of this inclination, stripped of this expectation, and now we're in this desert of wonder. Everything is expected, and therefore it's very easy to make the claim from that point of view that only emptiness and nothingness can be the source of everything that we see. Now, to me, the most interesting aspect of this particular novel is the introduction of a cosmicist angle, a Lovecraftian twist, if you will. Let me quote a page that I think will exemplify my point. Quote, "In addition, she had on board one member of that species who walked behind the stars. Its name was 91 syllables long, but in answer to Nepheri, the physical form it presented to her was an illusion, a thin wavering line of smoke shadow standing 3 times her height. Of its true form she knew nothing. Once she'd made the error of demanding that she see it as it actually was. The experience had been so traumatizing, she remembered nothing of what she'd seen. But she knew what lay just a few vibrations of vision beyond the smoke shadow was a thing so vile, so repugnant, so utterly without beauty or virtue, that no mind could witness it and remain sane. It was an engine of venoms and despair." Now, of course, it's very difficult to describe something like that and make it seem realistic. But, of course, when you read the Bhagavad Gita, for example, the universal form of the Lord, of God, is described in a similar fashion. And you find this also in the transfiguration of Jesus in a particular way. It's not exactly the same, but it has something of that. And the same thing with Moses and the vision of Yahweh. So there is a classic notion that beings that are beyond our understanding, that are outside of our metaphysical reality, right? That they're external to our universe, metaphysically speaking, cannot be perceived by material senses because it would drive us crazy. So I love that insertion into the story, and this is the reason I would love him to finish the entire quintet, because I would like to see where he takes that in particular, because now that is going in a complete different direction. It adds an additional villain to the mosaic, and I think it's a great villain. Now, of course, as you heard, the villains are indeed packed with tropes and exaggerated emotions and motives which to me can be clearly identified as focused on children because they're so simplistic and sometimes even silly. But again, I think that Barker was focusing on creating a children's book, so he filled it in with a lot of these kind of simplified villainous intent on these characters, and then he just rolled with it and eventually became more of an adult book as you go through the entire process. Anyhow, I think this is a great book within the series, my favorite of the 3 actually, and hopefully Barker can finish the entire series. If not, it was still a great trilogy if it remains that way. So again, I highly suggest it. Kids can read the first two, even if they're a little creepy, but the third one, I would highly consider reading it yourself before you present it. You know your own child better than anyone else. Philosophically, all over the place, but then again, I never expect horror to have a lot of depth when it comes to that topic. I am satisfied with a work of fiction that at least has some of it, sufficient for me to be interested and to even think about it. Now, if you read it and you took something more out of it, then put it in the comments. I love those discussions. At the end of the day, this whole project is about my interaction with books and my perception. You have your own, and that's completely valid and appreciated, no matter what the position is. So anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this short review. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, comment on the video. Thank you for being with me. See you next time.